Today, we're going to talk a little bit about how to transform the human mind into spiritual consciousness. The human mind can be broken down into several different components. You have your cognition, your intellect, your memory, and several other components. Your senses are constantly sending information into the mind. The intellect takes that information, rationalizes it. It takes the useful information and uses it as knowledge and gets rid of the other information. So your mind and your intellect is basically a flow of thoughts, and this process continues day after day, moment after moment. There was a little experiment done, and they said that in one day, approximately 40,000 thoughts pass through your mind. Some say there's a few more, some say there's a few less. But the point is, thousands of thoughts every single day, every single minute, every single moment is passing through your mind, through your intellect. In order for us to make our essential and basic decisions in life, in order for us to make our day-to-day living, we are constantly using the mind. We're constantly using the intellect. When we go to work, 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, we're constantly using the mind, constantly making decisions. When you're communicating with your family members, you're constantly using the mind. When you're on the computer, you're using your mind. When you're watching TV, you're using your mind. When you're on the phone, you're using your mind. There's a lot of social media today and a lot of digital and electronic devices consuming a lot of our mental energy. So on a day-to-day basis, if we were to look back and see how much energy we're using through our mind, through our mental body, it comes as no surprise. Continually, from day to day, we're constantly using our mind. Before we go to sleep, all the thoughts that we've had throughout our day, from working so many hours a day, from family situations, pressures in life, all the commitments that you have to meet, all the bills that you have to pay, all these thoughts are gathered inside of us. And before we go to sleep, hundreds and thousands of thoughts are continuing to go around in our mind, in our intellect. So we go to sleep with all these thoughts. When we wake up in the morning, the thoughts are still there. The whole cycle, the whole pattern starts again. So if you think about it, day in and day out, your mental body is continually running at a high speed. If this continues to happen day in and day out, it can affect your health, it can affect your physiology, it can be the cause of many mental illnesses, and there's a lot of talk about this right now. And most importantly, it does not allow you to experience spiritual awareness, spiritual consciousness. Now, inside of your mind, all these thought processes are continually taking place day in and day out. Because to perform all the essential things in your life, like working, dealing with your family, feeding yourself, taking care of your loved ones, driving, going on the phone, you need to use the mind. You need to use the intellect. It's one of the tools that nature has given to us for the very survival of our life. Now, on top of your thoughts, inside of your mental body, there is another body. It's called your emotional body. Now, your emotional body is made up of emotions. It basically breaks down to individual components of emotions. So there can be anger, jealousy, fear, resentment, so on and so forth. There are many positive emotions that are part of your emotional body as well. Love, compassion, forgiveness, tolerance, so on and so forth. So we have all kinds of day-to-day situations that are taking place. Everybody has pressure situations at work. We all go through it. It's possible that there's a certain conflict taking place at work. It's possible a fellow employee, a supervisor, or someone you work with, there's some tension in that area. So one of the thoughts that could be going through inside of your mind is a possible conflict with the person that you work with. So you're trying to deal with that thought. Now, if you were to take that problem and say you were to combine it with an emotion, let's say you combine it with anger. So this conflict already exists, and now you're combining it with anger. You combine the two, what happens? You get an explosion. So all of a sudden, you had a small problem. Now it's become 10 times as big. Why? Because anger, which is a very powerful emotion, it just connected with that problem that you have at work, and the whole thing compounded. It's like adding fuel to the fire. We all deal with family situations. We have all kinds of debates and all kinds of arguments, all kinds of commitments to fulfill. Say you have an issue with your partner, your husband or your wife. This thought is inside of your mind. And let's say all of a sudden, fear decides to combine with that problem. So all of a sudden, this problem or this conflict that you had with your partner, it just blew up. It went from here to here. Because emotions are very powerful and they're inside of our mind, you already had a problem, you already had a conflict with your partner. But now if you combine fear with that particular problem, it just expands, it snowballs. So in a similar way, we have all kinds of thoughts in our mind, and we have all kinds of emotions. Emotions come in many different shapes and sizes. So this process is constantly going on inside of you. Now, on top of your day-to-day situations and your day-to-day thoughts, and on top of your emotions, there is one more thing that resides inside of our mind, inside of our mental body. It's called desires. Desires comes in all shapes and sizes. You could be living in a decent house today, and your desire will be telling you from the inside, you know what? I work hard for my money. I know a lot of other people that make the same amount of money as we do, and yet they're living in a bigger house. I think it's time for us to look for a bigger house. You find a house, you move into it. A few months later, you take a look at the kitchen floor and you'll say, you know what? The kitchen floors are not right. They need to be redone. So you spend some money doing that. A few weeks later, it's really dark in the house. Maybe I need to change the paint. So you're moving from one desire to another. You could be driving a nice car right now. It could be a few years old. And your desire would be telling you, you know what? Maybe I'll get a new car. I like the way a new car smells. I miss it. I miss that smell of a new car. Hell, maybe I'll get one with a turbo engine. Why not? So your desires are taking you from one extreme to another. So your senses, whenever your eyes puts its sight on material things, it becomes attached to it. So your senses are constantly feeding your desires. Desires come in all shapes and sizes. Now, I'm not saying to run away from the material world. I'm not saying to renounce the world. You should live in the material world. You should enjoy the material world. But what I am saying is that there should be some level of control on your desires. There should be some level of control on your thoughts. There should be some level of control on your emotions. If you can, imagine a bunch of wild, untamed horses. A bunch of wild, untamed horses running around in an enclosed area. Inside of our mind, we have a bunch of wild, untamed horses running around inside of our mind. What would be the solution to that? One of the solutions would be try to catch each individual horse and try to tame it. Out of a bunch of horses, try to catch one. Try to tame that horse. You may have to catch it 5 times. You may have to catch it 10 times. So all these wild horses that are running inside of us are a combination of our thoughts, our emotions, and our desires. The idea is to catch one wild horse at a time. Focus on that horse. Try to tame it down. Try to gain some control over it. Once you can do that, once you achieve mastery over that one horse, you can go to the next one. So, enlightened masters have given us a wonderful secret. They say the greatest barrier to spiritual enlightenment is the human mind. When all thoughts come to an end, spiritual consciousness begins. So is there a simple solution that can help us to get control of all these wild horses that are inside of our mind? And the answer is yes. The solution would be learn to practice silence. Learn to sit in silence for a few minutes a day. There is a simple method that you can use to practice silence. There are 4 simple steps that you can take. So the first thing you want to do is you want to go inside of your mind. You want to open the door to your mind and you want to go inside. The first thing you want to do is take a good look at all the wild horses. Become aware of all your thoughts. Become aware of all your emotions. Become aware of all your desires. These are all the wild horses that are running around inside. So the first step is just to look inside. Come to the realization, oh, wait a second. There are hundreds and thousands of thoughts inside of me. That's true. But let me try to look at each thought and see what it is. Problem at work, problem with your partner, your money. Which emotion do you have the biggest problem with? Anger? Okay, so let's focus on anger first. Is the biggest emotion that you have a problem with, is it fear? So let's focus on fear. Is it jealousy? So let's focus on that. So go inside of yourself. Take a good look at what the problem is. That's step 1. The second step that I would suggest is become a witness. So now you open the door. You've gone inside. You've taken a good look at all the wild horses. All your emotions, all your thoughts, all your desires. Now, I want you to take a look at these desires and emotions and thoughts as an observer, as an outsider. So what you're doing now is, say you have a conflict at work, so you don't get along with your supervisor. Go inside of yourself. Take a look at that thought. Acknowledge it. Now tell yourself, I'm not working with this person. I'm just an outsider. I'm just observing the thought. Okay, so take a look at that conflict with your boss from an objective point of view. Take a look at the conflict with your partner from an objective point of view. You know there's anger inside of you. But you're not here to judge the anger. You're just here to look at it from an outside point of view. So learn to become a witness. to all your thoughts. This is the second step. The third step that I would suggest is, once you have mastered the technique of witnessing, is start detaching yourself from that thought. So if that conflict with your supervisor was there, first you acknowledged it, then you looked at it as a witness. Now you want to create some distance. You want to separate yourself. You're telling yourself, I don't want this to be my problem. I'm going to distance myself. So a little bit of gap has to be created. And the last step would be to release that thought, to release that emotion, to hit the delete button. We all have delete buttons inside, but we just don't know how to use it. So these are the 4 basic steps. It can take you a few months just to master the first step. In theory, what I'm saying may sound easy, but in practice, it could take a whole lifetime to do this. But on the other hand, if you're committed to it, if you practice it every day, you could achieve much greater and much faster results. So your results can come a lot faster. It depends on you. If you're willing to make a commitment, if you're willing to sit in silence a few minutes a day, 15 to 30 minutes a day, it is possible. But to master the first step will take a few weeks, a few months. Once you've done that, you want to go to the second step. That can take months, for some people even years. And then you want to go to the third step. So to master all these steps, you want to give yourself enough time. It's a process. So if you have 40,000 thoughts in your mind, your goal should be to bring it down to 30,000 thoughts, and then to 20, and so on and so forth. As the highway of thoughts begins to decrease inside of your mind, eventually what's going to happen is there's going to be a gap between one thought and the next thought, a distance. Now in this gap, in this distance, your gold mine awaits you. It is in this gap and in this distance that a spiritual experience will take place. When you detach yourself from the mind, that is when you get glimpses of enlightenment. And that enlightenment comes from the grace of the higher power. It has nothing to do with us. All we have to do is respect that grace, accept that grace, acknowledge it. Whether you want to call it the grace of God, or you want to call it the grace of the universal light, or the universal energy, it doesn't matter. These are all different names referring to that one great power. Now that great power, in my opinion, is there all the time. There is a wonderful saying by Prophet Muhammad where he says, God revealed to me that I cannot be contained in the heavens. I cannot be contained on earth. And yet, it is very possible for me to be contained in the heart of a truthful and loving person. Okay? It is possible for me to be contained in the heart of a truthful and loving person. Jesus Christ says the kingdom of heaven is within you. There are many, many dimensions within you. Thousands of years ago, when Krishna was revealing the Gita to his disciple Arjun, he says to his disciple, I reside in your heart and I reside in everyone's heart. So if the light of God is in every atom, in every molecule, it's all around us, and these great masters just told us that it's inside of us. Prophet Muhammad, Jesus Christ, Buddha, Krishna, they all talk about the light being around us and being inside of us. If that's the case, if we're surrounded by this light, how come we are not aware of this light? How come we are not conscious of this light? The reason that is the case is because we are being separated by the curtain of the intellect, the curtain of the mind. So the human mind is separating us from being conscious of this wonderful light, the universal light. So the light has always been there in the past. It'll always be there in the future. It's always been inside of us, but we've never been aware of it. So it's kind of like the fish swimming in the sea, but not being aware of the water. If you take the fish out of the water, all of a sudden, it'll say, oh, wait a sec, now I see the difference between the two. Put me back in the water. But now I'll consciously go back in the water. So this is the difference between the two. So, on the one hand, the very tool that you need to survive, your mind and your intellect, which is a God-given tool, and it's there for a reason, you have to use it. That same tool, when it comes to spiritual consciousness, it becomes a barrier. So the very tool you need to survive in the material world, you have to detach yourself from that tool to experience spiritual enlightenment. When you get up in the morning and you go and brush your teeth, after brushing your teeth, do you carry the brush around with you for the rest of the day? No, you don't. After brushing your teeth, you leave it. And then you move on to the next activity. When you go to the kitchen and you pour yourself a glass of water, after you have the water, do you carry the glass around with you for the rest of the day? No, you don't. After having the water, you put the glass away and you move on. When you want to go from home to work, from destination A to destination B, you drive your car. Once you get to work, do you carry your car around with you for the next 8 or 10 hours? No, you don't. Once you got to the point, once you got to your destination, you forgot about the car. When you go to sleep at night, and when you get up in the morning, do you carry the bed around with you for the rest of the day? No, you don't. So in some ways, you're already practicing this. So in the similar way, use your mind and your intellect every day for day-to-day survival, as you're supposed to do. But at the moment of silence, put your intellect and put your mind on the side. If you learn to put your mind on the side, then God can communicate with you. This is a practice that we must make essential. And everybody can practice silence. I'm not talking about complicated meditation methods. I'm not talking about postures. I'm not talking about religion here. These are universal spiritual concepts that apply to all of us. We're all made from the same cloth. The light of God is around all of us, and a drop of His light is inside of us too. It doesn't matter who we are, regardless of color, shape, or race. This applies to all of us. God is inside and around all of us. But in order for us to become conscious of it, you have to put your mind aside. You have to put your intellect aside. If you can spend a few minutes a day doing this simple practice, it can provide tremendous benefits. Today, there's a lot of talk about meditation and silence. A lot of the top-level executives that work in companies that are prosperous, a lot of these individuals practice sitting in silence for a few minutes a day. They say it improves productivity, it improves your health, they make greater progress, it's more abundance for the company. So there's a lot of health, physiological, and mental benefits to practicing silence. It can benefit you on all levels. If you're suffering from psychosomatic symptoms, it can help you with that. There are scientific studies have been done on health and physiology and its relationship to meditation. Emotional and mental diseases, meditation is very good for that. And more importantly, it allows you to achieve spiritual consciousness. It allows you to live in balance between the world of matter and the world of spirit. Now, if you were to take all your achievements of the material world, all your degrees, all your PhDs, the millions of dollars that you've made, your cars, your authority, all your accolades, put it on one side of the scale. And on the other side of the scale, if you can get 1 millisecond of that spiritual experience when you detach from your mind, 1 millisecond of that grace that comes from the higher power, if you were to put that one drop on this side of the scale, and all your material achievements and all your degrees and all your accolades on this side of the scale, guess what? This side of the scale, where you have one drop of that spiritual experience, completely outweighs all of this. And you can only get this if you detach from the mind and from the intellect. So just to wrap things up, it's okay to live in the world. It's okay to have a few desires. It's okay to enjoy. But at the same time, learn to detach from the mind. Learn to detach from your thoughts. Learn to detach from your emotions. And learn to detach from your desires. Because when you do that, you allow yourself to communicate with the higher power. And this possibility is there for all of us. Every single human on earth, billions of people, and other life forms too. This possibility is there for all of us. But I believe the only way you can approach this possibility is when you detach from the mind, when you detach from the intellect. Thank you for listening, and wishing you all the best.